Hello, I'm Denise Steele, original member of the Dolores Single Women's Refuge in Bondi. We started as an absolutely multicultural refuge, Aboriginal women, Maori women, Jewish women, Italian women, a magical collective of feminist women. I'm here today because I feel so sad and angered at the amount of work that older women have put into establishing these refuges and getting women's domestic violence up on the agenda. We fought so hard and now it's being decimated. And I'm angry and I'm not going to be taking it because I'm not going to waste 30, 40 years of my life for women's rights to have it decimated by the state and Commonwealth governments.
My name's Linda. I was one of the founding members of the Wagga Wagga Women's Health and Support Service, a feminist service that we started and we ran for years with no funding. That service was still going a few years ago. We actually wrote a book about the survival of that service, and I left there to move to Sydney, and we started a organisation called the Women's Health Information Rape Crisis Resource Centres Association, which was an umbrella organisation, and we'd meet regularly and talk about what we needed to do to organise and keep our services strong and healthy. I then worked at Lucy Women's Single Women's Refuge, another service out of Mount Druitt. That was an amazing service that hundreds of women come through there and make a new life for themselves. And finally I worked at the Bessie Smythe Abortion Service, a feminist abortion service out at Homebush. Now that was a service that changed my life. The empowering to be able to give women abortions so that they can actually make choices about their life and not be stuck with pregnancies they didn't want, stay in abusive situations. I've seen the full range of services that we started, we supported, and I came to realise as I was coming to Sydney regularly and having meetings with the Department of Health and Housing that these people were afraid of us. They were scared. They did not have any idea what these feminist women were going to do next, and they threw money at us to shut us up. And that's where we need to get to again. We need to make these people... child as a member of, affected by domestic violence, as my mother was being bashed by the ugly creature she married, and she would scream out to me, "Linda, save me, he's going to kill me," and I would run to the phone, barely old enough, barely tall enough to ring the police and say, "Come and help my mother." You know what the question they asked me was, is she married to him? Because if she was married to him, he was allowed to do whatever he wanted to her. So this is where we came from. And this is what we cannot let. This is what they want us to do, go back home and shut up. And it's time for us to say no way. And it's time for us to be angry. It's time for us to be vocal. It's time for us to take up a lot of space. Refuse to let them have their agenda, and we set the agenda, not them. Thank you.
Thanks very much. I think so many things have been said that I absolutely agree with. I won't go there. I was there on the day when we occupied LC's, but I didn't play nearly as big a role as some of the other women who are here today, like Christina and Kay and Chris Melmuth, and who really put in a huge amount of time into building the Women's Refuge movement. And I mean, it is for us, when you're doing something, it's interesting looking back. I worked at Liverpool Women's Health Centre when it was first opened, and actually just up the road here we occupied another building which was a working women's centre. And looking back then, we did worry about what's happening now. I think over the years you sort of forget, things become institutionalised, you think it's going to last. And when we were sort of in the feminist movement, in the women's liberation movement, we sort of read and thought about how gains were lost before and then had to be re-won. But when you're there, we did worry. Actually, we worried. We absolutely believed that for a woman to be safe and women and children to be safe is a public right. And I do believe that the refuges should be funded, but they should be under community and women's control. They should not be subject, as Eva said, to the next little crumb that's handed out. We also worry that by putting in those applications for state funding, that eventually it will be mainstreamed. And actually quite early on there was these threats of mainstreaming, which were talked about. And so, you know, then the years passed, we're back here again. We're back here now, and 40 years on, I think it is a tragedy actually what's happening to the women's refuges. And what's really bad is that the government is lying about it. They put out a press release this week that tried to pretend that women's refuges weren't closing down. Now, I was in Kempsey as it happened on the day when the women in the women's refuge in Kempsey got retrenched. That is a hugely popular, there's about 30 community organisations. The Aboriginal community, the Aboriginal elders are solidly behind a community-run refuge in Kempsey. And so what happens is that the government hands it over to an organisation I've not previously been aware of called the Samaritans. They're the Anglicans in Newcastle. They have no experience. You can go onto their website, you cannot find domestic violence, you can't find women's refuge. They've never done it before. Why would you give it to them? And then you're standing on the door of the refuge and you can see, like all refuges, there has to be some form of security. Women's lives are at risk, children's lives are at risk. Obviously, a refuge is a refuge. It is not a general shelter. And what was being envisaged there was a situation where women, for example, coming out of prison who also need services, which, by the way, are also being cut. They need services, they need special services, but they don't need to be all in the one building, which just happens to be owned by the government, as I noticed they have started saying. So I think what's really optimistic here, I'd really like to congratulate the women of No Shelter and the other women who organised the vigil as well, but the women in the No Shelter Collective have taken the initiative to say we are going to fight on this issue. I also think it's fantastic that they're thinking in terms of occupations, and I can say from a few conversations I've had with, I guess we could call ourselves older women now, we don't feel that old, and I think if there's an occupation at some stage, as long as we're on this, it's not called a phone tree, it's sort of like an email list, I think that some of us will definitely be there. Thank you very much.
My name's Coral. I'd just like to say, like the other woman who spoke, that I was involved in the women's liberation movement in the late 70s. We were fighting for abortion rights then, and we still haven't decriminalised abortion in the state. It's a shame. But 45 years later, I never thought we would come to this. You know, it was a struggle to set up those women's refuges, and you have to remember that police wouldn't come to domestic violence situations. They wouldn't charge anybody. It was a horrendous situation. And now we've come to this where they're closing down all the women's refuges. This government doesn't give a damn about women or children on the lower socio-economic scale, who are poor, who haven't got, it's just, you know, homelessness is going to increase, and it's a time when we need more refuges, because with the economic situation where there's going to be more and more jobless, there's going to be more and more violence, as men are frustrated and take out their frustrations on women and children and the family. It's a horrific situation, and I just hope we can continue this fight, and we have to spread the word and make this government back down.